following content may contain visuals that are disturbing, graphic, or sensitive in nature. Viewer discretion is advised. This material is intended for mature audiences and may not be suitable for all viewers. Please exercise caution while watching, and if you find such content distressing, we recommend discontinuing viewing. This disclaimer is provided to ensure awareness and to prioritize viewer well-being.
Hello and welcome to this Friday edition of Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna, and our big focus continues to be on the Israel-Hamas conflict. In its strongest public criticism of Israel yet since the Gaza war began, the United States has said there is a gap between Israel's intent to protect civilians and the reality on the ground. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said, "It remains imperative that Israel puts a premium on civilian protection. There does remain a gap between exactly what I said when I was there, the intent to protect civilians, and the actual results that we are seeing on the ground." The US says it has also been talking with Israel about implementing daily pauses in fighting and letting the Gazans know where they can go to move out of harm's way. Blinken said, Israel has an obligation to do everything possible to put a premium on protecting civilians and maximizing humanitarian assistance. US President Joe Biden, too, told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in a phone call on Thursday that it was critical to protect civilians as heavy urban combat rages around Gaza's biggest cities. In a statement, the White House has said, the president emphasized the critical need to protect civilians and to separate the civilian population from Hamas, including through corridors that allow people to move safely from defined areas of hostilities. Before Israel launched its southern offensive a week ago, US officials told Israel it must limit the toll on civilians, saying too many Palestinians were killed in its operations against Hamas in northern Gaza. Israel insists that it's taking steps to minimize harm to civilians, but the reality is hundreds of Palestinians have been killed just in recent days, including in areas where people were previously told to seek safety. A UN official has said the Israeli military offensive means there is no safe place left even for aid agencies in southern Gaza. Tens of thousands of Palestinians have fled to Rafah, near the border with Egypt, as intense fighting continues in Khan Younis in southern Gaza. Fires have broken out in the Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza, where Israeli tanks have been firing smoke and fire bombs. Hamas says an Israeli soldier who had been held hostage in Gaza has been killed in a clash between its fighters and Israeli special forces who were conducting a rescue operation. The Palestinian Health Ministry says Israeli forces shot dead 6 Palestinians today at Al-Farah camp in the north of the Israeli-occupied West Bank. Hamas attacked Israel in October, killing 1,200 people and taking 240 hostages, some of whom were released during a recent 7-day truce. Hamas officials in Gaza say Israel has killed more than 17,000 people in its retaliatory campaign, including about 7,000 children. Meanwhile, in a development that is expected to help smooth the way for more aid to reach Gazans who are running desperately low on basic supplies, Israel has agreed to open its Kerem Shalom crossing to screen goods being taken into Gaza from Egypt. The UN Security Council is set to meet later today to vote on whether to call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. This comes after the UN's humanitarian chief, Martin Griffiths, said its humanitarian program in Gaza is no longer a functioning one. As the war rages on, Israel also faces a threat from Hezbollah, and now Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has threatened devastation in Beirut and southern Lebanon if Hezbollah opens a second front in Israel's war with Hamas. Netanyahu said, and I quote, "If Hezbollah decides to open an all-out war, then with its own hands, it will turn Beirut and southern Lebanon into Gaza and Khan Younis." Hezbollah has expressed solidarity with Hamas as the fighting in the Gaza Strip has escalated. Cross-border fire between Israel and Hezbollah has become a daily occurrence. But so far, Hezbollah has held off from launching a full-blown military campaign against Israel.
The Israelis have been evacuating neighborhoods instead of entire cities, so focusing in on a much more deliberate way on those who may be in harm's way. as they conduct the campaign against Hamas, establishing some deconfliction areas, some safe areas that people can go to, where they can be safe from being in the line of fire, and having a more narrowly focused area of where this military operation is actually being conducted. Having said that, as we stand here almost a week into this campaign in the South after the end of the humanitarian pause, it is imperative, it remains imperative that Israel put a premium on civilian protection. And there does remain a gap between exactly what I said when I was there, the intent to protect civilians, and the actual results that we're seeing on the ground.
If Hezbollah chooses to start an all-out war, then it will by its own hand turn Beirut and southern Lebanon, not far from here, into Gaza and Khan Younis.
All right, so let's discuss these latest developments with our guests. Joining me on Global Lens tonight is Limor Bletter, Deputy Chief of Mission at the Consulate General of Israel to South India, joining us from Bengaluru. Dr. Ido Zelkovitz, Head of Middle East Studies at Yezreel Valley College, joining us live from Haifa in Israel. And completing the panel tonight is Ambassador Yogesh Gupta, former Indian diplomat, joining us from New Delhi. A warm welcome to all three of you. Limor Bletter, if I could begin with you. What should be made of what Antony Blinken has said? Many believe that the US, Israel's closest ally, which has so far stood solidly in support of Israel, even amidst mounting international criticism, now may be running out of patience and is increasingly exhibiting its unease with the growing number of killings of Palestinians in Gaza. Antony Blinken, who's visited Israel 4 times since the war began, has said there is a gap between the intent to protect civilians and the actual results that we are seeing on the ground. How is this being seen in Israel?
So, good evening. We know that, so how is it seen in Israel? We know exactly what IDF is doing, and we know the measures, extreme measures that are being used by the Israeli army in order to mitigate any harm to civilians or people that are not involved. But again, the situation is very difficult where you have a terrorist organization, which we need to remind everyone that is still holding the 138 hostages since October 7, and they are hiding behind civilian infrastructure, behind UN agencies. Just recently, a few days ago, they fired 12 rockets from the humanitarian area in the south of the Strip. So what can we do if we are being targeted from areas into Israeli cities, from areas where we have civilians that are being many civilians, of course, of very dense places where Hamas is, as usual, doing a dual war crime, where he's shooting at Israeli civilians and also shooting from within density populated areas within the Gaza Strip. So Israel does not have any other choice and just go and deal with the people and with the terrorists and with the infrastructure that is being kept in this civilian area. Again, there are many efforts that are being done by IDF, which so many. I mean, we use different ways of notifying people, of evacuating people. But again, at the end of the day, Israel needs to work to release the hostages, to get back the safety to its southern area and to all of Israel. And I need to remind you all that even today, still there were rockets, there were sirens that being heard in Israel, and there were rockets being fired towards Israel. So Israel is still has to do whatever it takes to destroy Hamas, to get back to safety, to bring the hostages back. We know now what is going on. We have some hostages that came back. The stories are unbearable. Small kids that came back, still whispering. They were not given a lot of food. They were isolated. They were we are only starting to begin what is going on with these hostages that are still there. There are still 118 men, there are 20 women, there are 2 children, 2 small children are still there. Israel is doing whatever it can, and also, of course, maintaining the international law, trying to protect civilians that are not involved within Gaza. But at the end of the day, Israel needs to needs to bring back safety to its people. We need to make sure that the events of the October 7th and the attacks that are going on since then will not repeat itself. And we need to make sure that we bring back all the hostages. So this is now the main goals, and we will do whatever needed. And again, if Hamas is hiding, they only want to blame, and the numbers, obviously, we need to also mention that any numbers that are being brought by Hamas, these are numbers that needs to be anything that comes from Hamas is something terrorist organization, needs to be cautionly, verified. You need to check these numbers is again by a terrorist organization. So, and some of the children they're mentioning is actually terror. When you say children, is a 17-year-old with a that is shooting at people. Is he a child that was killed in the battle, or is he a terrorist? That's a terrorist. So again, these numbers is something that we don't know, and the only information we are giving is from a terrorist organization who raped and brutally murdered people and is not protecting civilians in Gaza.
Okay. Of course, the point that you make about Hamas's butchery and the horrors that the hostages have been subjected to is absolutely valid. However, we can go on debating the numbers. Fact of the matter is, thousands of Palestinians have been killed on the ground. Also, you say Israel is doing everything it can to minimize civilian casualties. The world doesn't seem to agree, and now even the United States doesn't seem to agree. I want to go across to Dr. Zelkovitz at this point. Dr. Zelkovitz, of course, these are numbers that have been put out by the Hamas-run health ministry. They have said that Israel has killed more than 17,000 Palestinians in the last 2 months of the war in its retaliatory military campaign, and that more than 7,000 of these people were children. Today you have the United States, the strongest Israeli ally, saying things like Israel has an obligation to do everything possible to put a premium on protecting civilians and maximizing humanitarian assistance, and there is a gap between Israel's intent to protect civilians and the reality on the ground. In fact, even before the war expanded from northern Gaza to southern Gaza, the US did say on record that too many Palestinians had been killed. My question to you simply is this: would you agree that this is the strongest public criticism of Israel's handling of this war by its closest ally, the United States, in the last 2 months?
Well, I will put the things in the right context. Until now, we haven't heard the United States of America giving Israel any clear deadline. And this is the most important thing. There is a need for, especially for the current administration in the United States, to say things that will sound nicely, especially in the ears of his supporters from the Democratic Party. And we know that in the margin lines of this Democratic Party in the US today, we have very criticized voices regarding to Israel. So I think Blinken is paying right now the contribution to the Democratic Party followers in the United States. But if we are looking generally about the American officially point of view. I see that there is no real change on the ground. America is still supporting Israel. America doesn't give Israel any deadline to end the military campaign. Furthermore, America is still providing Israel with all of the needed armory to deal with Hamas tunnel systems, and there is military coordination between both of the sides. One should also remember that among of the captured people, the kidnapped people that Hamas took, there are also American citizens. So America also have an obligation to its own people that have been taken by Hamas into custody, by the way, both civilians and soldiers. Israel faces a lot of challenges in this military campaign, and I must say that from a strategic point of view, Israel do whatever it can in order to prevent from damaging civilian life. But the problem is that Hamas gunmen, Hamas militias gunmen, are first and foremost doesn't wear any uniforms. They are shooting Israel, and you can see it in their own officially videos that they are launching into the media. They are dressing in civilian clothes. They are using civilians as a human shield. And by the way, if we are talking about the numbers that the health ministry in Gaza providing us, one should also remember that this Ministry of Health is running by Hamas. It's not belonging anymore to the Palestinian Authority. They don't have any limitation of minimal ethic. So first and foremost, I will not buy their numbers as a real facts on the ground. And secondly, we also should remember that Hamas and other terrorist organizations over there in the Gaza Strip don't provide us the numbers of their own casualties. I can tell you that according to different military analysts, they are analyzing that until now, at least between 7,000 to 8,000 people that have been killed in the Gaza Strip during this war belong to Hamas and its terrorist, another terrorist organization in Gaza, such as Islamic Jihad, PFLP, Fatah, the local Committee of Resistance, and etc. So even if we are taking this number that Hamas Health Ministry of Health published, which they are talking about 17,000 people that have been killed until now, we can see that the ratio between one that was involving in fighting to civilians is 1 to 2.5, 1 to 3. And this is one of the lowest ratio rates in modern world combating. If we will try to compare it to numbers between unarmed and armed people that the American targeted in Iraq, over there they used to talk about 1 to 20. Israel does whatever they can in order to prevent from injuring and killing unarmed population in the Gaza Strip. But the Hamas is using the population, and by the way, some of the population is also part of Hamas infrastructure. If we are talking about the people that don't hold guns, but they are providing Hamas with other military skills such as cyber, what Israel should do, or intelligence. Israel should target them, yes or not? I think that the answer is clear. Everyone that is related to Hamas, from the military armed into the communication branch, should be targeted by Israel. This is a war.
Okay. Honestly, I don't know how valid your argument is about more people dying in the Iraq war than in the Gaza war, because two wrongs do not make a right. And we can go on debating these numbers. You can go on disputing these figures. Israel says Hamas is probably exaggerating the death toll. Hamas will turn around and say that Israel would want the world to believe that most of those who've died were terrorists, when fact of the matter is that thousands of innocent civilians have been killed as well. Remember, this is a tiny enclave of 2.3 million people that we're talking about. Surely it is not Israel's case that those 2.3 million people are all Hamas terrorists and therefore deserve to die. So let me now.
At least 60% of the Gaza Strip population is supporting of Hamas.
Well,
of course,
sir, frankly, it is their word versus yours. But at the end of the day, let's not make light of so many deaths.
Yes, of course.
Let's not. I'm not sure, Dr. Zelkovitz. Okay,
I want to clarify
complete your
the
point.
things with your permission. Thank you very much. If one is not part of the war, of course, so it should not be targeted. People have the right to believe in whatever they want. But if you are supporting in Hamas, well, Hamas brought this catastrophe on the Gaza Strip. I haven't said that everyone who is supporting Hamas should be killed, but you should also take a note that 60% of the Gaza Strip population at least supported Hamas, and Hamas.
That is your argument. But number one, even if I believe your argument for a moment that 60% of Palestinians support Hamas, and I have no independent, sort of corroboration of this, even then they certainly don't deserve to die. And there are many people who will make a counter argument. I know. And there are many people who will make a counter argument and say that Palestinians are as much victims of Hamas terrorists as Israel have been. And surely the world does not believe that the 2.3 million people who are trapped in that tiny enclave are all terrorists. Nobody believes that, and I don't think we should be dismissive of so many deaths. Thousands have died, and we cannot dismiss these deaths. Okay, I will come back to you, Dr. Zelkovitz. Ambassador Yogesh Gupta, let me come to you, since we are focusing right now on the stance of the United States. What Antony Blinken has said is very significant and is making global headlines today for a good reason. Our Israeli guests say that we don't have a choice, Israel has to go ahead with this war. Dr. Zelkovitz also says, there isn't really any significant change in American stance. Of course, America is not going to withdraw its support to Israel. But my question to you is, going by what Antony Blinken has said, do you believe this is mere posturing on part of the United States, given that Joe Biden has to face an election next year? Or do you believe that point has come where the US is genuinely concerned that there is growing anger around the world, there is anger even amongst Americans, and that it is becoming increasingly difficult to justify the killings of so many Palestinians?
Oh, Neha, I will agree with the second part or the last part of your statement, which is that I think the Americans, the Biden administration is concerned about the high number of deaths of the Palestinians in the Gaza. I mean, this number of 17,000 may not be absolutely accurate. But the fact is that the war against Gaza has resulted in a very large number of deaths, simply because Israel's campaign against the Gazans has not been very targeted or has not been very, let's say, focused. Maybe it's because of the nature of the issue or nature of the way the militants, Palestinian militants or the Hamas militants have been hiding behind the civilians in the tunnels, beneath the hospital and so on. All that is accepted. But the fact is that this war has now resulted in a very large-scale embarrassment for the United States. President Biden has to face an election. And a lot of people belonging to Muslim countries, developing countries in the US are getting against President Biden. His popularity is already very low. in the elections. The other thing is that this war is now sort of, it could adopt more and more of a regional escalation in case because the Iranians are wanting the Houthis in Yemen to get more and more involved, and the Houthis have started getting involved. Similarly, the spoilers like China and Russia, they have started playing a bigger role. President Putin recently paid a visit to UAE and Saudi Arabia, and he's trying to play up some role. The president of Iran is visiting Russia. Similarly, the foreign ministers of Muslim countries and Arab countries, they went to China, and China is trying to play a role. Now, I don't know. I mean, I know that the role of China and Russia in the war is somewhat limited. But they are acting as spoilers and as embarrassing the United States. So United States is receiving a lot of flack, is receiving a lot of criticism that much of the pain that has been inflicted on the Palestinians in this war is because of the blank support that the United States has given to Israel. So I think Blinken is trying to sort of retract from some of that support and is trying to put some more pressure on Israel to become more focused in its campaign against the Hamas militants, to give more space to the civilians in Gaza's Strip. So that is, I see it differently, and as I said, more in terms of the concern that the Americans now have, the Biden administration now has, in trying to distance itself away from this, that's a blank check given to Israel earlier.
Okay, you make some very interesting points, but I think it is very late in the day for the Biden administration to distance itself from this war, because too much damage has already been done. Too many Palestinians have already died. And of course, no matter how much damage control they might want to do, the world does realize that this would have probably not even been entirely possible were it not for the unstinting support that the US has extended to Israel. And you're of course quite right in pointing out that not only is there growing anger in the Arab world, you also have players like Russia and China that have been very critical of the US and called it out in time and again. So let me go back to my Israeli guests at this point. Limor Blatter, you heard the our Indian guest Ambassador Yogesh Gupta, who believes that as anger grows around the world over the killings of Palestinians, it's not just Israel which is feeling the heat, but so is the United States, and the United States is now going to increasingly put pressure on Israel despite all the support that it may have extended to you all along. I wonder what your thoughts on that are. Also, I want to quote for our viewers what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said earlier today. He said, if Hezbollah decides to open an all-out war against us, we will turn Beirut and southern Lebanon into Gaza and Khan Younis. The point is that there has already been a lot of fighting between Hezbollah and the Israeli forces along the Lebanon border. You've had attacks from Houthi rebels in Yemen, especially on vessels, in that region. And then, of course, there is Iran, which is believed to be the mastermind of everything that's happened so far, especially on the 7th of October. And then there are the forces in Syria. So while Prime Minister Netanyahu issues this threat to Hezbollah, fact of the matter is it is Israel which is staring at a very real possibility of this war escalating and many of these players getting involved.
So, to answer first of all, the first question, United States is, we know that they are very supportive of Israel. They're still supportive of Israel. As you said, it's the major ally for Israel, and even if these things are being said, we know we have their support and there are good relations still. And again, as I said, regarding and some of the previous things that were mentioned about casualties in Gaza, there is one. There's one huge organization to blame right now, which could have prevented all of this, which is Hamas. If Hamas did not embed themselves within Gaza the way they are, and we see the tunnels, and we are the more that Israel is continuing the ground operation in Gaza, the more that we see what explosives, what missiles, where they embed themselves, the places, within schools, next to places where kids are playing, next to organizations, UN civil organizations, next to agencies, humanitarian agencies within Gaza. So the more we understand, it's very simple. Hamas could stop now, they could have prevented this. They could have not gone and did what they did on October 7th. They can stop firing. They can help if what Israel is doing is actually, at the end of the day, is going to help also the innocent or the people not involved in Gaza, because we are helping them to free Gaza from Hamas, which will obviously only benefit the people in Gaza. Because right now, Gaza is all the resources that are coming to Gaza are being exploited for terror. They have built huge tunnels. They've built the infrastructure is just unimaginable, and it's and you just see it wherever you see the footage that are coming from IDF, what they're finding, and it just doesn't stop. So the main. First of all, we should all remember, when we are talking about the civilians of Gaza that are being killed, we need to remember Hamas has all the options to stop this killing, but they are not doing it. Hamas could have not been there, so could have not been doing whatever they did, and also using all these places for terrorist actions and for the sole purposes of hurting civilians and of annihilating the state of Israel, which is what that's their purpose. So if that wasn't happening, obviously we wouldn't have been in this situation. So that's an important anecdote I wanted to make. And besides that, what we were saying about different fronts, Israel is not interested in any escalation. It's not trying to open any fronts with in Lebanon. But if the situation continues, Israel will do whatever it needs to protect itself in all fronts. And again, what Israel is fighting, it's not only for itself; it's around the regions, and it's to and if Israel doesn't stop these forces of terror, they will go elsewhere. It's not only against Israel; it's against the developed world. And we know Iran is behind this, and we will do whatever needed to make Israel safe. And again, we do not want to open war. We did not start this war with Hamas. We did not start the war, and we did not start any fighting in the north. But the whole situation is being forced upon us, and Israel will do whatever it needs. If in the north, Lebanon and Hezbollah will start. We know they've been attacking since October 7th. We see the attacks, and we will do whatever needed. We're not interested in war. This is not our purpose. We don't want to open any front. And the Houthis that you've mentioned, these are things that are actually supposedly against Israelis, but they're actually harassing and they're making obstacles for the trade coming in these places where the Houthis are attacking. So these are things that should worry not only Israel.
Okay. You say Israel does not want to open a new front, but other players could. So, Dr. Zelkovitz, let me ask you this question. We've talked about how Israel does face a threat from Iran. We've talked about the role of Hezbollah in Lebanon. We've talked about the Houthi rebels in Yemen, and there are anti-Israel forces operating in Syria. And not to mention the fact that there is growing resentment and anger in the Arab world, given that so many people have died in Gaza. And, you know, it's very interesting. French President Emmanuel Macron said just a couple of days ago, how can there be lasting peace and security for Israel if it comes at the cost of so many Palestinian lives, and if there is so much resentment and anger in the region, in the countries that Israel is surrounded by? Do you not believe that is a valid argument, and do you not believe that there is a serious threat of this war escalating in the days ahead and maybe more players in the region getting engulfed in it? A multi-front war, as we call it.
I really do believe that Israel, first and foremost, in order to have peace with its neighbors, should be a strong country and should have a strong military skills. Without having our military capabilities, our neighbors will not live in peace with our existence. Now, getting back to this point, Israel.
Okay, we seem to have lost the link there to Dr. Zelkovitz. I will go back to him as soon as we have the link up. Ambassador Gupta, if I could put that same question to you, sir. Is there a serious likelihood in your assessment of the war escalating, other players getting engulfed, and Israel facing a multi-front war? Because there are already these threats from all the players that I have just listed. And I found what the French president said extremely interesting and valid, that can Israel hope to achieve lasting security for its citizens if it comes at the cost of so many Palestinian lives and after causing so much anger and resentment in the Arab world?
Well, they have, the war can expand further with the involvement of the Houthis and so on, more involvement of maybe Hezbollah and so on. But I think the effort so far, as far as Iran is concerned, is to avoid Iran's direct involvement. And also, I think Iran wants to contain very massive or very substantial involvement of the Hezbollah's against Israel in this war, because Iran wants to retain that capability for itself, just in case. If, for instance, tomorrow Israel were to turn against Iran itself, or the US were to turn against Iran itself, then Iran wants to retain that Hezbollah capability for that eventuality. So I don't think there will be a massive involvement of the Hezbollahs until the situation completely goes out of control. The war escalates very severely or massively. So I would say that the escalation, yes, possible, but in a limited sense.
I've completely run out of time, so I'd like to thank all my guests, Limor Bletter, Dr. Zelkovitz and Ambassador Yogesh Gupta for joining me on Global Lens. We look forward to having all of you back on the show in the days ahead. Of course, as we said, clearly pressure on Israel is mounting. And now its closest ally, the United States, also seems to be reading the riot act to it. All right, on that note, let's slip into a quick break here on Global Lens. Don't go anywhere, we have plenty more on the other side.
With all this gear, you must be wondering if I'm climbing a mountain. Well, let me give you a wider look of this place. This is Asia's largest mountain of shame.
A mountain of waste, almost the height of the Qutb Minar.
When you enter capital cities of some of the biggest countries in the world, You don't have 3 garbage mountains waiting to welcome you depending on whichever side of the city you enter from.
The thing is that a lot of times we talk about landfills only when there's a fire at the landfill. You need to understand that a landfill is at fire almost throughout the year. It's only when the firefighters are not able to douse the fire is when it actually catches the nation's attention, the city's attention, or media attention.
The towering landfills worsen one of Delhi's biggest problems: pollution.
यहाँ पर आप रात को आओ, दिन में आओ, आप 1 घंटे बैठ नहीं सकते बाहर। इतनी धूल, प्रदूषण, महक, आप खाना भी नहीं खा सकते बाहर बैठ के।
Life around the landfill is a curse.
हमारे घर में जो बड़े हैं उन्हें अस्थमा के वो पेशेंट है, आए दिन उनको नेबुलाइजर लगाना पड़ता है।
डॉक्टर ने मुझे ये चीज बोला कि यहाँ का एरिया छोड़ के कहीं और चाहिए।
Delhi's garbage mountains are now a fetid symbol of the national capital's trash problem. The question is, who is to be blamed? Watch Delhi's Garbage Mountains. Streaming on News9 Plus for the Genflix.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. Let's now get you the big story from the United States. Hunter Biden has been indicted on multiple counts of tax evasion. This is the second time this year that President Joe Biden's troubled son has been charged by a special counsel investigating his personal and business dealings. Special counsel David Weiss said in the 56-page indictment filed in the U.S. District Court in California that Hunter Biden engaged in a 4-year scheme to not pay at least $1.4 million in self-assessed federal taxes that he owed for years from 2016 through 2019. Biden was charged with 9 counts of failing to file and pay taxes, tax evasion and filing false tax returns. The new charges serve up more acute embarrassment for President Biden as he wages an uphill battle for re-election and fends off a Republican bid to impeach him on grounds that he benefited from his son's overseas business dealings. The previous charges accuse the younger Biden of lying about his drug use on a federal application when he purchased a gun. The new charges mean that Hunter Biden could, in theory, go on trial twice next year, as his father almost certainly faces Donald Trump in the race for the US president. Biden has insisted he stands by his son despite his past troubled behavior. The new indictment says Hunter Biden earned more than $7 million between 2016 and 2020 and used this money for a freewheeling lifestyle. The indictment states, and I quote, the defendant spent millions of dollars on an extravagant lifestyle. At the same time, he chose not to pay his taxes. Between 2016 and 2020, the defendant spent his money on drugs, escorts, girlfriends, luxury hotels, rental properties, exotic cars, clothing and other items of a personal nature. In short, everything but his taxes. Hunter Biden pleaded not guilty this year to 3 felony charges stemming from his purchase of a .38 caliber Colt Cobra revolver in 2018, when by his own admission he was addicted to drugs. He is charged with illegally possessing the handgun and 2 counts of making false statements for claiming on forms required for the gun purchase that he was not using drugs at the time. Republicans have opened an impeachment inquiry in the Congress into what they claim is a Biden family criminal conspiracy, but have so far provided no evidence to suggest that the president personally did anything wrong. And as we wrap up Global Lens tonight, our final story is from Russia. Russian President Vladimir Putin has made it official he will run in the 2024 presidential election. Putin announced his decision to seek an extension of his rule of 24 years following an awards ceremony for army personnel held at the Kremlin today. On Thursday, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov had said many people have urged Putin to run. In fact, on Thursday, Russian lawmakers set the date for the country's 2024 presidential election for the 17th of March, moving Putin a step closer to a fifth term in office. Members of the Federation Council, Russia's upper house of parliament, voted unanimously to approve a decree setting the date. Under constitutional reforms that he orchestrated, 71-year-old Putin is eligible to seek 2 more 6-year terms after his current one expires next year, potentially allowing him to remain in power until 2036. Having established tight control over Russia's political system, Putin's victory in the March election is all but assured. Prominent critics who could challenge him on the ballot are either in jail or living abroad, and most independent media have been banned in that country. Neither the costly drawn-out war in Ukraine nor a failed rebellion this summer by mercenary chief Yevgeny Prigozhin appear to have impacted Putin's high approval ratings reported by independent pollsters. Who will challenge him on the ballot still remains unclear. Imprisoned opposition leader Alexei Navalny, in an online statement, has urged his supporters to vote for anyone but Vladimir Putin.
Thank you very much. I will not hide that. I've had different thoughts at different times. But it is now time to make a decision. But now, you're right. It is such a time when a decision needs to be made. I will run for the position of President of the Russian Federation.
Well, that's all the time we have on this Friday edition of Global Lens. Thanks so much for watching. Do join us again at the same time on Monday. Have a great weekend ahead.
BrahMos. Stealthy, lethal, precise. It flies at 3 times the speed of sound and cuts through a warship like a hot knife through butter. China's navy has threatened its neighbors, and they are turning to the BrahMos for protection.